huge point. Decolonization. Can someone try to jump? We've got 25 minutes, so we're not in a hurry here. Although if I can get it done in 10 minutes, I'll run and get this to me, Vals. But let me just get you to figure out, why is this a big, big, big deal for decolonization? Let me just remind you, okay? Remember, we had two main documents, two really important documents in World War II. And they're not like important in the sense that they started World War II, but they are important because they talk about what's going to happen with the Cold War. The first document is the Atlantic Charter. Who wrote this? Who was a part of this?
The United States wrote it.
United States. It's an American document, clearly, but who also agrees?
France and Britain.
Yeah, England is the one that they're talking with directly, and France agree with them, right? And what does this Atlantic Charter really spell out? Aside from the fact that we don't like Hitler, which is really clear, what else does it spell out?
They have to end their they have to decolonize.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Decolonization. This is basically the future of the world. Decolonization. But they're going to have the United Nations, which is a little bit like the League of Nations, except it's got some teeth. We're going to have the four freedoms. People are going to have basically human rights is what we're going to expect. We didn't call them human rights, we just called them four freedoms. Basically, this is we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, pursuit, and happiness. Yet they didn't use a single word of those. They talked freedom of speech, expression, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, freedom from want. These are the basic rights that everybody has. That's what they're talking about. Those are the human rights. And that this is a new world order. This is the future of the world. Okay? Great. Really important. What's the other document? In fact, there's a whole bunch like them, but this one is particularly relevant for the Cold War. You're right.
Well, I have the Berlin.
That's it. That's exactly it. But how does that fit, Dr. Zorea? Berlin, Moscow, Berlin, Soviet. Why? What? That's just between Germany and Russia. How does that? It's not the same as the Atlantic Charter. Well, remember, the Atlantic Charter is only between the U.S. and UK, but it represents more than that. What does this represent? What were the purposes? What were the clauses, the provisions?
Russia would protect Germany's back while they would.
Yeah, now that's secret, though. That's the secret. The public part was that Germany is not at war with the Soviets. That's basically what it says. But we know, and found out almost immediately in the middle of the war when Germany attacked Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union kind of lets it slip, that the secret provisions is that Poland would be cut in half and shared between Germany and the Soviet Union, and that Soviet Union could attack Finland, and basically what they could create are spheres of power. So what future, what do we see in this worldview? This is an empire worldview. And why is this a great big giant deal for the Cold War? Because the Soviet Union begins on this side, and then in 1940, where are they at? They're over here. But this isn't the worldview that they're a part of. They didn't sign up on the Atlantic Charter. They don't see this. And so that means that when we get to the Cold War and we start to decolonize, what that means is that we have each of these colonies around the world, whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in South America, you basically have the same pattern. You have the European government, and then you have the locals. And which of these actually has all the knowledge and the technology to create a state? Who brought it with them? Europeans. This is where the evidence, the practice, the history, the experience of statecraft comes from. But the locals are learning, right? Cultural diffusion is inevitable. Well, the war ends. We have the Cold War, and our policy is containment. That's what the Allies decide to do. Containment. What does that mean? Remember, you have three options And this is when we were talking about the Berlin airlift. The Berlin airlift was in 1947. Does anybody remember the details of that? Here's Germany, here's where the Soviet tanks were, and this is Berlin. And they divided up into 3 parts. And Berlin, the Soviet Union basically put barbed wire around West Berlin and said, nobody comes in. You can go, but no one comes in, so they're going to starve. And so that means that the Allies had 3 options. What were the 3 options? We can attack, right? But how does that fit in with our New World Order bit? We don't want that. We could do nothing, but what happens when you do nothing?
War's inevitable.
It's inevitable because you're training them, you're telling them you can do whatever you want to and we're going to sit idly by. Heck, I'm going to do everything I want to, right? In terms of the power, if you're thinking rule by might, you're actually encouraging them to expand. So you do nothing, you're going to end up fighting, but you're going to fight when you're in a bad position. So what's the third option? Containment. Well, it's not attacking, it's not doing nothing. You do not allow them to expand. No expansion. That's what this means, right? No expansion. So we go here and we talk about what's happening. Why is this a big deal? Decolonization means what? It means Europe leaves. It means the people that were creating the state in that colony are gone. So who is left? The local. And in terms of democracy, we love that, right? But what's the problem?
That gives Russia, not just Russia, but it gives the countries who support communism a chance to spread communism.
2 issues. Number 1, even if there's no problem at all, even if Soviet Union doesn't exist, if England leaves out of India, India was not united by itself. It was united through pacification. There was like a big country that united all the hundreds and hundreds of little groups together. You remove the big guy, what happens to all those hundreds and hundreds of little groups? They start fighting. And this has nothing to do with whether somebody wants to come in yet. This is just its own self. It's a problem. Because you're not really that big. They were smaller. But by having this big country, they want to stay together. What happens? England in 1949 leaves India. Okay? What immediately happens as soon as they leave, in fact, I could be wrong. This might not be 1949. I'm sorry. It could be 46. That's right after the war. What happened to India immediately afterwards?
Civil War.
Instant civil war. Because the English were the ones that were keeping the peace. And why are they civil war? Because they want to all be in charge. This is why Gandhi got to be so famous. He kept saying, people, just settle down. We'll do this peacefully. He was saying that to the British first, but then he was saying that to his own folks. And in the end, you know what happened? Why do we have Pakistan here? Do you know why this is Pakistan? Why this is India? In fact, there's 2 other groups here. Why? What religion is Pakistan? Muslim, right? What religion is India? Hindu. And so they just divided. And that was the solution, but it took about 4 years of civil war for that to happen. And this is without anybody else making a problem. So just the whole point of decolonization itself is a problem. When you're dealing with the only country, the only source of your state is that European, and the Europeans leave, then just that alone is hard. But what happens when we add to it the fact that we have the natural decolonization? Just by itself, this is a problem. But in addition to this, you also have Cold War containment. And the Cold War containment means that you have 2 sides. One side is the rule of law. And this is going to be the Allies. This will be England and France and US and dozens of others. And then what's the other side? Rule by might. And this is going to be the Soviet Union.